If entertaining outdoors is important to you guys, make sure you check out today's video because we are going to put the U7 Outdoor AP from Ubiquiti to the test and see how far we can go before we actually disconnect from it. And I think the results will kind of surprise you. I know they did me. Now, in my time of doing this, I've been so lucky to get to work with some awesome people and build some great outdoor entertaining spaces as it pertains to Wi-Fi. However, in most of those cases, honestly, we're just trying to get coverage in the backyard. So we're just extending our Wi-Fi from inside the house to outside the house, trying to get coverage in a pretty small area. Maybe a swimming pool's out there, or a hot tub, or maybe you got this little reading spot that you like to sit that's back in the shade. However, what happens if you want to extend service to an outbuilding that's a little ways away, or add a wireless camera to your dock to keep an eye on your boat because you don't have Ethernet out there? I mean, how far does the Wi-Fi really go? So I got my hands on a U7 outdoor access point from Ubiquiti and we put this to the test. Now, my plan for this was really simple, maybe too simple for a lot of you out there, but I see a lot of people when they do these kind of tests, they grab their Wi-Fi Man app and they start walking and they kind of show you their screen as the signal goes down. However, I don't think that really paints the picture of what I'm trying to show. What I want you guys to walk away with after watching this video is how far can I go and actually use my internet, right? I mean, it's fine if I show you a signal that's minus 70 dB, but what does that really tell you? It just tells you that my signal reader can still connect to it and that's the signal. However, but can I use Netflix? Can I open the YouTube TV app? What's my speed test going to tell me? And so that is the kind of test I want to do. So I grabbed my little rangefinder here, which can go out 1,000 yards, and I started walking and taking these tests as I went along. Then, once I got out so far that I couldn't connect anymore, I came back and I put on the omnidirectional antennas and I did the test again. And I will tell you guys, the U7 Outdoor Access Point really shined and I'm excited to show you these results. All right, before we get into our testing, I did want to share the specs of the U7 Outdoor with you guys so you have that information. I think that's important. And then I promise we'll get into the fun stuff. I'm going to read it off. We're going to make this go fast and we'll go. Now, one thing I want to tell you is this is not the U7 Outdoor Pro. There are two variations of this AP. This is the standard version, if you will. If you guys would like to see the same tests done with the Pro, I'll see if Ubiquiti will send me one and we can run some similar tests. But just understand that I have the standard one here, but I'll try and call out some of the differences and similarities as we read through the specs here. All right, so the U7 Outdoor, the standard one that I have right now is IPX Outdoor rated. It's going to run you $199 from Unifi. It runs Wi-Fi 7. It does not have the 6 gigahertz band. That's one of the differences between the two, is the Pro does have 6 gigahertz support where the standard version does not. It's 4 spatial streams, 2x2 MIMO on the 5 gigahertz and 2x2 MIMO on the 2.4 gigahertz. Like many of the U7 APs out there, both of them have 2.5 gigabit ports on the bottom for faster connection speed, and both have the same coverage area listed at 465 square meters or 5,000 square feet. Now, one cool thing I think they did was you get some choices as it pertains to your antennas. Right in the box, you do not have to pay extra for it, but basically out of the box, if you don't do anything, both of them have what there's listed as a directional super antenna built into the device that gives you some of those greater distances. However, you do have the option to screw on some omnidirectional antennas that are included with the kit. You do not have to pay extra for those, which I think that's really, really great that they did that. So besides the 6 gigahertz coverage and the weird weatherproof rating spec in there, there's a lot of similarities between these two devices, but if you like the idea of 6 gigahertz and getting a little bit more spatial streams, then upgrading to the 279 version is going to be the way to go. However, again, they're very, very similar, and so I think this test is kind of relevant for both of them. But again, I'll do the other test. If you guys would like to see it, just make sure you leave the comments below. All right, guys, so here is the AP for our test. I just have it mounted to a TV bracket so I can kind of move it the way I want to. Right now, we are just using the super directional antenna that is installed in the AP. If we go up top here, you'll see there's where we would add the external omnidirectional antennas. Now, normally there's some caps that cover up these holes to make it waterproof. However, it's a nice day. We don't have to worry about it raining, and we're going to pop those antennas in here in a little bit for our testing. So I'm going to leave them out for right now. Now, if we scroll behind us, you can see we have a lot of open land behind us, which is really great. This is going to allow us to you know, walk a really long way and see how the connection lasts as we do it. I got my rangefinder. We're going to kind of take some readings, and then I'm going to show you guys a summary on the screen of all the testing that we did and what the conclusion is for this access point. So I'm really excited for that. All right, so we're going to set a baseline here using speedtest.net. Now, I realize before you guys rip me up in the comments that speed test isn't the perfect way to quantify how well this AP is performing, but I think it will give us a sort of idea about whether or not the internet will be usable at these different distances. So we got to start somewhere. Right now I'm 10 feet away from the access point, and we're going to use this speed test as our baseline. Now, I've taken 4 or 5 here. This is the 6th one that I finally actually recorded, and they've all been pretty consistently around that 800 megabits per second download and 50 upload on my speed test. So we're going to use this as our baseline, and then we're going to start moving away from the AP and see what happens. So stay tuned for that. All right, first test with the internal antenna. We are 25 yards out. We're going to go ahead and run our first speed test. All right, so this is my first side test. This is about as far to the side as I can go before the signal gets blocked by my house. We are 75 yards out. All right, here's my next test. A little bit more straight back from my house at 100 yards from the access point. All right, we're in our next position. We're 170 yards, almost straight back from the house, and this will be where we perform our next speed test. All right, the house is getting smaller. We are at 225 yards for our next speed test. Let's see how it goes. All right, there's the view of the back of my house from 300 yards for this particular test. Let's see if we can even connect. All right, so because the last speed test went as well as it did, I've decided to go out even farther. This time we're at 375 yards using the internal antenna. All right, so now it is time to get our access point ready for our omnidirectional antenna test. So we're going to go ahead and just screw in our antennas. You can see we have the caps out already. I'm just going to go ahead and screw these in. Okay. Doesn't matter which one you put on which side. They're both the same from that standpoint. One is not marked 5 gigahertz and the other one marked 2.4, so you're okay there. All right, now we have that on. Now we need to go into the software and adjust which antenna we want the access point to use. I'm going to be doing this from the Unifi app, but you can do it from the computer as well. But once you're in there, you're going to go over to devices. You're going to find the U7 Outdoor and select that. And then you're going to go over to settings and radios. And right there towards the top, you can see built-in antenna. We're just going to go ahead and switch that to omni antenna and hit save. All right, we'll wait for the device to refresh, and then we'll start our tests. All right, so let's get our baseline for our omnidirectional test here. Now, I think I mentioned last time that I normally sit between the 300 to 400 range. So the fact that mine shot up to like 800 for the internal test is a little crazy. This is typically what I usually see. So I consider this probably a little closer baseline than what we used before. But we'll see how it goes moving forward. So this is the first test with the omnidirectional antennas. We are in my yard and we're about 25 yards away from the AP and down the hill a little bit, which may play into some of our speeds. All right, here's test number 2. We're on the south side of the house. We're 75 yards away from the AP, and this is the first kind of area you can see it where the access point isn't blocked by the house. Let's see how it goes. All right, next test with the omnidirectional antennas. We are 100 yards away from the house, a little more behind it this time. Let's see how this test goes. So for this test, we're 170 yards. Now you might have noticed that the tests aren't near as fast as they were with the internal antenna. So let's see how this one goes at 170 yards. As a little follow-up item to my last test, between 170 and 200 yards was about as far out as I could go before I was even having trouble connecting to the access point. Now I'm on the north side of my house, also 75 yards out, so kind of testing the other side of the AP. Let's see how we do here. For my final test here, I want to just test the outer limits from the side. So we are 265 yards away from the antenna, but more to the side. And for the record, with the internal antenna, I couldn't even see the Wi-Fi from here. Let's see how speed test goes. All right, so to kind of summarize our findings here, I thought what I would do is I would go over into Design Center and sort of overlap my test with what it says the AP should be able to do. And I think this paints a pretty good picture about some of the results that we saw, however, with some differences. And so I did put this to scale. So this is to scale. And what we're looking at first here is the outdoor directional AP. So you can see the general shape of how it broadcasts straight out from the house. If we zoom in, we got it kind of positioned down here right where everything sort of starts. And you can see how the tests sort of take place. Now, one thing you might notice is that even at this little 25-yard one, which again, our tests were fine, you notice that it really does focus most of its signal and its speed and everything directly out from it. You don't really get a wide band. And so even my little 25-yard test was in the yellow, showing 72 dBm, which again may allude to some of the speeds I got. Now, as we kind of work our way out and look at the different distances, and keep in mind, I tested at the end of every one of these lines, and still got pretty darn good speeds. Even here at 375, which this shows at very poor signal at minus 81, you know, I was still pulling almost 100 megabits per second speed, could open YouTube TV just fine and stream. I could stream at any one of these areas. However, if we go up in our diagram here, this over here at 265, one of the ones I did with just the omnidirectional, I couldn't even connect to the house. There's no way. And you can see why. There's just no signal shooting out this direction. Now, I was able to connect at 75 yards and do a speed test there, but again, the results were better on the omnidirectional. So ultimately, what I think this boils down to is where you need the signal to go. And so let me kind of show you what the omnidirectional looks like so you can kind of maybe gauge which one would work better for you. So basically, we're taking the same thing here and we're just changing the antenna, right? The AP didn't move. We're just changing the antennas. And you can see how the shape really does change. It shoots out in all directions, just not quite as far. It's more of a wide connection versus a deep, long connection like what we just showed with the directional super antenna. Now, again, some of the tests could have been just speed tests being speed tests and not giving consistent results. That's a risk we take with this type of test. However, in general, I do think that my test outshined what is shown here. Almost like this plays it a little bit safe because I was still able to pull okay speeds at 170 yards, although I really, at this location right here is where I did see my signal starting to degrade quite a bit. And somewhere between this 170 and 225 is where I really it really dropped off pretty badly. However, at 75 yards, 100 yards, even clear out here at 265, the very last test that I run, you see I'm able to connect. Now, was it the fastest test? Absolutely not. It wasn't super fast. However, I couldn't even connect to it using the other antenna, that's built in. So the fact that I could even connect really shows that, you know, maybe the Design Center plays it a little bit safe. And it's, you know, it's designed to give you an idea of the coverage. It's probably not going to give you an exact coverage because, again, I was getting connection clear out here at the 170 mark. And if you just went 100% by Design Center, you'd think I wouldn't be connected at all. So if you're looking at putting outdoor Wi-Fi and you like the idea of using the U7 Outdoor, it really boils down to where you need your signal to go. If you're shooting it straight forward, maybe you got a dock that's a little ways down or an outbuilding that's a little ways away, I think just using the built-in super antenna is going to be the way to go. However, if you I think just want more general backyard coverage and want it to go a little bit wider, having those omnidirectional antennas is pretty awesome. Like, again, I was pretty impressed. All right, guys, so let's wrap this up with our findings. Now, there's a lot of numbers on here, but ultimately, as you scan through this chart, please understand that what we were trying to test here was usability, right? So it's not just the speed, because speed test using speedtest.net or any of the other ones out there is really inconclusive data because there's just a lot of things that can create variables in what you're trying to do. What's important to understand is, was it fast enough to be usable, right? So every one of these places, as we went along, unless it was just, 300, I would go ahead and fire up some streaming apps just to make sure they worked. YouTube TV, live TV, did the HD quality, was it good? Could I change channels and have it be responsive? Things like that. Now, I couldn't show you that, guys, that on my screen share because the screen share was really messing with it on my phone and I didn't have another device with me to test on. However, ultimately, it worked everywhere. All the streaming apps that I opened would just, in general, fire right up. Even down here at this, 265, I was able to open up YouTube TV and stream right from, 265 yards away at these slower speeds. Now, if you're looking at the directional antenna numbers over here, they were really good. I mean, you can easily stream on 75, 71, 90 megs down, and we were 375 yards out. Like I said, I probably could have went out further, but I was going to be in people's houses. And the second that you start putting houses in the way, obviously that's going to kill the signal. So I went about as far back as I could go while staying connected and not being in other people's yards. But ultimately, what we found here is that both the directional antenna and the omnidirectional antenna performed very, very well and offered usable internet speeds, we'll call, from every one of these distances. Now, depending on where you're trying to get signal may determine how you have to aim the AP. If you're using the omnidirectional, again, you saw that even they were kind of would shoot more out than, out to the side versus straight forward in front of the house. So maybe there's even some aiming there. But ultimately, really, really good AP. I was blown away by my results. About the only thing that was, in my opinion, just because I know what speeds I usually get, was sort of caught me off guard was that my baseline initial test that I ran was 800 and some megabits per second. That's crazy. I don't usually pull that. Usually I'm pulling 4. So this number is high. Typically I'm at the 400 range, 350, 300 typically. So my baseline is high. I guess T-Mobile was having a good day, whatever the deal was. But, it just, so, when I'm pulling 317, this is pretty much full speed. This is pretty much full speed. This is pretty much close to full speed, and then it kind of started to drop from there, but ultimately very usable internet. I was really, really happy with the results. So guys, I hope this helps you out. Again, lots of numbers here. Pause on the slide, take a look at for yourself, but I was very, very pleased. I'll put some links in the description. Guys, feel free to take a look. One thing I will call out here, I probably should have called it out earlier, but if you're building a house, really the only way to get Wi-Fi like this is to have an outdoor AP, which means you're going to want to run a cable for this and plan for it. So if you're curious about ways you can do that, there's also links in the description for my cheater's guide on how to do that. Basically, it just gives you all the answers. Doesn't quiz you. You don't have to pass 1,000 tests. It's $20. it's the cheater's guide, right? It gives you all the answers. Maybe check it out. But you're going to want to plan for this if you're building a house, because that's how you get these results. If this AP, or we were trying to connect from an AP in our house, we wouldn't have got anywhere close to these distances. So this is how you plan for it. All right, guys, so I'm going to sign off. Thanks for watching. Again, leave comments in the description. I'll try and get back to you, and we will see you guys down the road in a future video. Thanks.